Good. Tell us if you're in good shape to start, and Jackson, give me the heads up on where you're at, and we'll start. Jackson, you did not hear from Dave, right?
No, I haven't heard from Dave.
Okay. This is generally the time of year that he heads off to Florida. I
Right.
wasn't sure whether he was gone or not, and I was not sure if he would join us since we were virtual. So if he is if Dave is asking to be let in, please let him in. Otherwise, because right now, to my understanding, nobody else has been appointed. There are formally 3 members of this committee. And thanks to Pat for showing up, we have 3 members, including the alternate. So if Jackson and Marcia are good to go, we can start anytime. Jackson, yeah, you were muted. I couldn't hear you.
I am good to go.
Okay, and Marcia's nodding her head. Okay, so unless anybody else has any reason to wait, we will call the meeting of the Historic Preservation and Architectural Review Board of the Village of Cooperstown to order. There is a public hearing on the agenda regarding the 21 Railroad Avenue garage demolition. Jackson, would you like to say anything about that?
I haven't received any inquiries or requests to speak or anything of the sort. Nope.
Okay, and we are okay approving the demolition for the buyer without that property changing hands yet? That's not a problem?
Attached to the application that was shared at the end of that, there is a note from the current property owner saying he was comfortable moving forward. But I think that whatever approvals are made mentioned should probably formally be
contingent upon.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Okay. I appreciate all the I's being dotted and T's being crossed. Okay. All right. If there is nobody who's asked to speak or waiting to speak, I would like to leave the public hearing open while we talk to George about the other aspects on the application, just for that window of time, even though I know at this point it's unlikely anybody's going to come forward. Okay. George, in the meantime, would you like to tell us about where your project is evolving and what you're looking for at this point?
Well, at this point, I didn't think I'd make it another month for starters with waiting for this mortgage, but it looks like we're going to close on the sale of my property on Friday, which is then going to, we're going to move forward probably the following week with the closing of this property. Yes, as far as the plans go, yeah, we were looking to build the 30 by 50 structure at the bottom right-hand corner of the driveway. It's going to be living quarters for my wife and I to manage the property with the 2-car garage below. There were a couple changes as far as the design goes, and one of which was an additional bedroom window and a slight design change for the kitchen windows. Aside from that, everything that we discussed in the prior meeting has remained the same.
Okay. And at this point, again, Jackson, because George is not currently the owner of the property, are we able to vote on issuing a permit, or do we have to wait until he formally owns the property? Jackson, were you able to hear me?
I think Jackson's lost.
Okay, well, that would make sense. Um, well, while we're waiting to see if Jackson finds us again, Pat, do you have any questions for George? I don't think you were in the last meeting when
Yep.
he presented the plans. So George, Pat may have more detailed questions, but forgive us, it wouldn't hurt to have a refresher.
Sure. Well, of course, also there's a response from Mike Mano above this. I guess that's not being shown to my writing him that
Mhm.
states that he was okay with me moving forward. But go ahead, sure, anything.
I
whatever.
understand that Mike is okay with it. I'm just not sure if legally we can grant a permit to somebody who doesn't own the property. I understand the owner is okay with
Right.
it. So anyway, while we're waiting for Jackson to hopefully reconnect, Pat or Jesse, if either of you have questions in whatever order.
I don't have any questions. I think it was pretty well covered in the last meeting. So Pat, your turn.
Well, I'm assuming that since I wasn't at the last meeting, that it was pretty well covered. So I don't have any questions really either, but I would be very reluctant to make a deal with somebody who could possibly not own the property in the end. In other words, I think it would be worth waiting till we're actually dealing with the real owner. That's just a personal opinion. I'm not a lawyer. So.
Apologies, I got lost in my screen share there. I don't believe that approving the look and location of this structure through the HPARB, I don't think that there's anything wrong. I don't think there's any problem with that. Of course, a building permit wouldn't be issued until ownership transferred, and I can share screen again, but as you saw, I got kind of lost there last time. There is a letter from the current owner saying that he's comfortable with these procedures moving forward at this time.
Yeah, there's a difference between agreeing to the concept and actually issuing the permit is what you're saying.
A big difference, yes.
I'm good with that.
Liz, we can't hear you.
Pat must be good at reading lips. We make the approval. I was kind of reiterating with what Jackson said, which was we make the approval of issuing the permit contingent upon the transfer of the property to the new owner,
That makes
correct?
sense.
Okay, all right. Pat, I know that this is new to you, so do you need George to quickly review anything, or is it pretty cut and dry what they're proposing to do?
It looked to me like it was pretty evident from the drawings
Okay.
what they had in mind.
Okay. And Jesse, you're good with the change he just proposed as well as what we heard at the last meeting, correct?
Yeah, I think they're both good ideas.
Okay. Do either of you want to make a motion? I guess we should make a motion to approve the design as presented with the change presented tonight.
Jesse, can you do that? Because I'm still not up to speed on all the lingo in the,
Okay, I'll dig out.
I may never be.
Yeah, this is an area where I am deficient. I'm going to put it on
Okay.
my list of things to do this month.
Things to bug me about. I'm digging out my
Maybe.
cheat sheet unless I gave it away.
Maybe we can take a class.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, Marcia, we're going to work with you on the exact formatting and verbiage of this motion. when I find my cheat sheet and share it with you. But I will put forward a motion to approve the structure as presented. George, you gave us details on materials, windows, et cetera, at the last meeting, correct?
Correct.
And contingent upon the permit being issued after the ownership is transferred to George Macaluso. And Jackson, you look like you might have a question. Do you have a question?
I guess we're going to wait until the later on in this meeting to approve the demo. which
I was going to do that next. I bit
Okay.
my lip. I was halfway through that. So anyway, we can do it in either order. Which would you prefer?
Order doesn't matter to me, but we need to close the period of
Right.
public hearing before we.
Yeah, so let's move forward with this motion so it's complete. And then we'll close the public hearing and vote on the demolition as proposed. Okay. So do we have a second?
Second,
Any discussion?
No.
Okay. Liz votes yay.
Jesse votes
That's it.
yay.
Pat, yeah,
Okay, thank you all. And now we'll revisit the public hearing regarding the demolition of the portion of the current structure at 21 Railroad Avenue, the current garage outbuilding structure. Since nobody has come forward at the meeting or communicated with the zoning enforcement officer regarding the proposed demolition of this building, we can have any discussion board members would like to have at this point. Are there any concerns or questions regarding the demolition?
No.
It's a partial demolition, Pat. A portion of the structure will remain standing and be integrated into the new structure. Just
seems like a nice idea.
yeah. Okay. So if there aren't any questions or concerns, I propose issuing the permit for the partial demolition of the outbuilding structure at 21 Railroad Avenue. Do we have a second?
Second,
Okay.
Any
or
discussion?
third, Jesse, if you prefer.
Any discussion?
Again, contingent upon property transfer.
Thank you very much. Yes, contingent upon the transfer of the property to the new owner. Okay, no discussion other than that. Liz votes yay.
Pat,
Jesse,
yay.
I vote
Hey.
yay. The three of us.
Looks like it's unanimous. All right. Any other questions or comments? George, do you need anything else from us?
Not on this project, no.
Okay, okay.
We do have
Well, that's-
Take that as a warning, huh?
Yes.
Well, we do have
Is that a threat?
a field change for the past project that he brought up, which I didn't stack next, but we can go ahead and jump to it next as
Okay,
the Maple project is going to take a little bit of.
right, discussion.
Yeah.
Yes.
So which project is, that's the 13 Fernley, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Okay.
so it's a field change at 13 Fernley. Would you like to tell us, George, what you'd like to do? What your proposed field change is?
Yes, the customer would like to install a single door there with it's a Thermatruth Smooth Star Craftsman door with simulated divided lights, 3/2. That's an old picture. This is just going to be a single door without the side lights. And we're looking to put a small porch roof over it with wooden supports coming off of the house.
And so
Um,
those are going to arch out or angle out, I would assume, the support?
Yes,
Do you
yes,
have
there
a-
should be a,
So the side view is what we're looking at on the right of the drawing?
I'm not seeing anything that pertains, actually.
Okay, oh, you don't have the drawing, there is a drawing?
Yeah, well,
Um,
I submitted it via email.
mhm.
Can you see my share screen right now, George? Can anyone see my share screen?
I'm looking back at the HPAR file.
I
as we
see it, but
talk,
I
so-
see the old the old picture of the door.
Okay.
Maybe you didn't receive my email. I'm not sure.
I got, Jackson, in the email you sent us, there was a drawing of the single door with the overhang. And on the side of that drawing, on the lower right-hand side, it
There it
looks like
is.
the drawing of the arch down on the lower right-hand side. That's what that'll look like in profile, correct?
Yes, that's the side view.
Okay.
And in this case, we'd be just matching the roof with the charcoal shingles, dimensional shingles. And that's kind of a color swatch of what they want to paint the door. Moonless night exterior, it's called. And keeping the trim the same color, white.
Do we care about the color of a door?
Nope, we
No.
do not, but thank you for sharing it. I always
You're welcome.
chuckle, I always chuckle at paint colors.
In disapproval or approval?
No, it just takes a lot of creativity to come
You're
up with
so
all these
right.
I've always
names.
thought it would be a fun job for a couple of weeks.
A couple of days, and then it'd be like, it's black.
Yeah, all right, well,
That's no, it's all good. The nuances though, and what they're trying to suggest are always funny. Okay, does anybody have any questions for George regarding the proposed field change at
I-
13 Friendly?
I have a general question, and that is, I see PVC trim. How do we
Yep.
feel about AZAC or any of those, the trim boards that are made out of cellular PVC?
that are made out of what?
Cellular piece.
Cellular PVC. I mean, I love the stuff, but I'm like a fish out of water in this.
So are you asking why PVC versus something else?
No,
Or
I'm
cellular.
I'm asking the board how we
Oh.
feel about PVC in that kind of application.
We have, first of all, this is not a contributing structure. And
Okay.
in this particular application, if I remember correctly, we approved PVC in other spots, correct, George?
Yes, you did.
We have approved paintable
PVC.
PVC and paintable non-wood trim for even on historic houses in areas that might get a lot of moisture and weather. So it's not out of the question. This is going to be painted and paintable, correct, George? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. It certainly probably would fall under a lot more scrutiny, Pat, if it were a contributing structure, especially on the front door.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Yep. What are your thoughts?
No, I'm for it
Okay,
personally.
okay. I think, it's
it
got
never
its
wrapped.
pros. Yep,
Uh,
yep. So,
Generally speaking, the modern wood products that are sold as trim are of such wide grain and short growth periods that they do not
Oh.
last like the old material. did.
Absolutely.
It's a shame, but in these kind of high wear, high exposure instances, it makes a lot of sense.
yeah. Jesse, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I don't think so. I'm kind of, it's another craftsman style door on a house that essentially has very little character. It seems to be the taste of the time, and I guess, and on the whole, I prefer this to some other things, so we'll go with it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's, we're sort of It used to be that it would have been, sort of quasi-colonial or something, but the proportions are fine, I think. And that's probably the most important thing.
Mhm.
And it's, the door will let light into the hall, which is useful.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the field change at 13 Fernley Drive?
I can,
Oh, good. Sorry, Jesse, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the field change at 13 Fernley Drive to a non-contributing building within the district. I think that's all I need to say because it is non-contributing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And Pat, would you like to second that motion?
I would second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. Liz votes yay.
Pat, yeah,
Jesse.
Thank you. Okay, George, thank you very much for your time.
And thank you all. Have a good night.
Sure. You
you as
too.
well.
Thanks, George. You too.
Okay. All right. Going back to my agenda, which is flipping through multiple computer screens here, Jackson. Sorry. Okay. So we dealt with the public hearing, 21 Railroad, 13 Fernley. Let's address number 2 on the agenda, 34 Maple Street, unless there's a reason to do it in a different order, Jackson.
I don't believe so. We've got Dan on the line regarding 14 Elm. And
Oh,
I
okay.
think-
Well, if he's on the line, why don't we do that first then, unless somebody's waiting regarding 34 Maple.
Sure. No,
Okay.
on 30, no.
Okay.
Sure, that's
Then-
Dan.
Marcia, I'm sorry to confuse you so much. We're going to go to item number 4 on the agenda and talk about 14 Maple Street.
14 Elm
So
Street.
I'm sorry, 14 Elm Street. Thank you. Got the number right, the street wrong. Okay, so Dan, would you like to talk to a little bit to us about what's going on at this point with 14 Elm Street? Bring everybody up to speed.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Hunter. I'm heading up I guess the general contracting portion of the project that we would like to do at 14 Elm Street. Obviously, that burned out house on Elm Street that I'm gaining understanding that everybody is thrilled that we're going to do something with. I guess it's been years sitting there as is.
I think 5 now, or maybe 6. I think 6.
Yeah, it's easily
Yeah.
5.
No, it was when Dan was still in school, so that's 6. So yeah. So thank you, Dan. We're very excited.
Okay.
And go ahead, tell us what you're thinking, what your questions are, what your concerns are.
Seeing, I'm fairly new to the 8 carb concept here. So I'm a little bit relying on some of you to tell me where we need to go, how we need to head this up, what we plan on doing, and I've met with Jackson on the property. I've got a fairly good understanding of how this is going to roll. There is obviously the main front structure of the house is something that is not really going to be touched at all as far as the exterior goes. There's no damage in it other than the smoke damage the inside of the house needs replacing. It's been ruined through water damage and the smoke damage as well, but there's no charred members or anything in the majority of the front section. So that gets to stay at least exteriorly as it is. Like to ask some questions about potential for windows or whatever. We'll cross that bridge in a moment. Just trying to get an understanding of, I know that we need a demolition permit. I believe there was a demolition permit that was issued, according to what Jackson said, to the previous owner at some point in time. We actually really want to touch very little of the exterior of the house that hasn't already been disturbed. Most of it is in good standing. I mean, obviously it needs a paint job and like a said about potential for some windows in the front door, which has a lot of rot on it. But the majority of the exterior is going to stay as is. So we do need a demo permit. I don't know how we go about that exactly, but I already talked to the county code enforcement, and they said that I need something from you before we can start down the avenue of issuing building permits. It's either you or zoning, or if it's all the same, I'm not quite sure. But let me see, I'm gonna look back at a few of my notes. I welcome any questions that you want to throw at me. Maybe it sheds more light that way, because you guys are a little bit more familiar with the process than I am. There was the demo permit that I mentioned. Like I said, we're not touching anything in the front box of the house. Exteriorly, in the back, obviously it's all wide open in the back. We're gonna have to rebuild that, as well as, I believe that the previous demo permit was including almost the entire back section that was giving them the room to remove as much as they needed to. I don't, after looking at it and going through the place with the contractor and such, I don't believe we're going to be touching much more than has already been opened, you want to say. Because most of the exterior, at least on the sides, everything that's visible from the front is staying almost as it is. It's mostly just the very back of the building that needs to be rebuilt, and a little bit more demolition as well there before that can be done, due to all the charred remains that are there. I'm going to end up having some questions on windows. I'm going to end up having some questions on especially windows in the back of the building. One of the benefits of that property is it does overlook Doubleday Field. And going to want an opportunity to incorporate, obviously there's the historic aspect of it that we don't want to disturb, but as well incorporating a little bit of a comfort feel, a modern feel towards the back, where they can be able to sit and take a look out their back windows and see a game going on. I'm going to have questions on what do we do about air conditioning, like an air conditioning condenser. We have to replace the entire heating system. How do we go about this? I'd love to have some sort of a central AC, but that usually has, it has exterior condensers, and obviously that's not historical. So where do we go with that? Is it something that we hide in the backyard? Is that acceptable? I was talking to Jackson about, the place is really overgrown. There's a lot of scrub brush it's going to have to get removed. Potentially some tree trimming as well. And I understand that's a little bit more of a permission thing. But where do I go with the do we need the permission for just cleaning up the brush that's just growing up there? And so those are hitting basically all the points of questions that I'm going to have, and asking that you guide me through where I go from here.
Okay. So I'll start, and Jackson, feel free to chime in. Jesse and Pat, feel free to chime in, and we all may have questions. The
Absolutely.
demo permit was issued and has expired. When it was issued, we did issue it for a bigger section than I personally would like to see removed. So I'm delighted to hear that you're trying to save some of that back section, or thinking about trying to save some of that back section, because I think that transitional section is still pretty early and very interesting. And so what you would do is, or the owner, if you're the owner's representative, fill out an application with Jackson before the next meeting, and then we would set a date for the public hearing at the following meeting. We have to basically get the application before we can, a month before we can hold the public hearing regarding the demolition of a structure. That's correct, right, Jackson?
It is, and Dan was able to get me out an
Oh, good.
application.
Okay.
I mean, we can get caught up on the fee, which
Mhm.
we haven't gotten into the office yet,
Mhm.
but I'm curious how specific we need to hear from Dan about where the line is, where they stop the demo. It's going to be a little bit of an exploratory process as I understood from the contractor, they're intending to maybe get some sandblasting in there to actually be able to structurally assess the timbers that are charred to see if they need to be removed or not.
Wow.
I don't
Awesome.
know if we need full plans or something like that to really create a hard line where that demo is at this time before it can be considered.
We can have a conversation about that with the board members who are present. And Dan, you don't have the B team in one way because Pat and Jesse are very talented in design and perspective and historic preservation. And Pat is an alternate, and Jesse has just moved from the alternate to a HPAR board seat. But our board is a little thin tonight, so that's where we're missing a person or two, where other questions may come up along the way. But this is my perspective in terms of what I remember from issuing that permit in the past. And that was, our intention was to save the front street facing section of the building with the hope that there would be portions of the transitional section saved as well. But we issued the demolition permit allowing for the demolition of the rear section in whole if necessary. Pat or Jesse, I don't know if you have any comments or questions related to that or concerns about discussing an application for a permit that is that extensive.
I would like to say that I was in the house about 3 months ago, and it looked to me like the rear section, which was obviously a lot newer than either the middle or the front. If I were doing it, I would consider it jettisonable. So in terms of the demo, depending on what Dan wants to save for his own purposes, I would start at the back and just work forward, but just consider the back end of the intermediate section sort of like a no-go line. And at that point, if for some reason Dan feels that it has to go further than that, I think he needs to come back
For a
to,
field change.
right.
I think that makes sense.
Mhm.
The building's been tarped out or not tarped out for a long time. So if it's tarped properly, if you discover that you really have to come back, you should be able to do that. I had a question. Is this intended to be a single unit, or because there was somebody who was looking at this a while ago thinking of turning this into apartments instead? What's the intent for this building now?
The intention is a single family, it's just a single family home. Similar to what I see is left. The entire upstairs had already been gutted by the previous owner. So it's hard to tell exactly how the place was laid out previously, but our intention is a single family home there.
Okay.
And for a couple of decades, it was a B&B. So just in case you hadn't been made aware of that, Dan, it was used as a B&B. I think that front section was the bulk of it. I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that. So
I have a quick question I have is, I don't, like I was mentioning, I don't know that we have to bring any more of the exterior, I should say, short of the roof. The roof, the entire rafter section of the roof I believe, especially the back section. I don't think the front section, but we have to take apart a little bit of there's paneling up there and such that we have to get underneath and take a look at. But I believe the integrity of the front roof is fine. But the whole back roof of the L is it's destroyed. The fire went up into the attic and raged through the attic, starting in the back, going towards the front. So the entire roof structure is going to have to be replaced. I do know that.
You mean in the back?
In the back,
In the back.
in the L.
Apart from the roof structure in the back, it is my belief at this time that we don't need to disturb any more of the exterior of the building than has already been disturbed.
Okay.
If that be the case, because the roof structure is in really bad repair. And apart from that, the second worst place is actually the basement. The basement ceiling, first floor, the floor joists on the first floor. Those are the worst burned out of any portion of the building other than the attic.
In the L, not in the front section, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
front section is just water damage, and it's water damage and smoke damage from everything I've seen so far.
Okay. You said something about in the front section that you think you're going to have to gut the front section. I was under the impression that the front section on the first floor retained a lot of historic period paneling, especially on the right-hand side as you face the building. Also, fireplace surrounds. Are those, you consider those to be destroyed at this point and not able to be salvaged? And
They certainly have a lot of damage to them. I don't know. I'd have to look into that a little bit deeper.
okay, yeah, I've never been in this building. It's not, I'd like to see the inside of it. In part because walking by, looking in the windows, it looks to me like that paneling is mostly in pretty good shape. And I'd be sorry to see that paneling go, because that's probably what was there to begin with.
It's currently it's lath and plaster. There's no paneling in the downstairs of the.
On the
There's
right
no
hand?
paneling in the downstairs that I am aware of.
Oh, I thought that, okay.
There are some very unusual structural things. In other words, instead of thick studs, there have been planks that have been used in lieu of studs, which are wider but thinner.
Yep, that's pretty standard for that period.
Mhm.
So you have very thin walls.
Right, right.
Yeah, they're only like 2 inches thick.
Yeah.
Right. And the question that I would have for energy efficiency is he going to be able to live with walls that are that thin in terms of being able to, not pay a fortune in fuel?
Right. Well, I think the next one of the questions that I have to discuss is how do we get the maximum energy efficiency with the older construction?
Insulate the roof.
Yeah.
First
thing,
step,
first
insulate
thing,
the roof.
Right. That's for sure.
You want to insulate the roof as high as you can, as high as you can get it. If you can get, you need to get to 70. Ideally, you'd like to get up 80, 85. If you insulate the roof, a lot of my house, I did it, built in 1886. It was incredible, the difference. I used 360 gallons a year for a house that was built in 1886 with no insulation in the walls, but it is insulated in the walls now. But I can give you some ideas. There are some other people out there who can as well, who have worked with this. But you're looking at high R foam, and you're probably going to need to work from the inside out rather than the outside in. But
Absolutely.
you can do pretty well. And if you can get your rim joist insulated out as well, you will find that house will do pretty nicely. It's just that you do need to, the first thing is the roof, and then the joist, and then you work on the stuff that's in between. So,
Right, because I imagine that, with a modern house, with really thin walls, you would do something like spray foam, but I wouldn't want to do spray foam in a place like this because that would kind of ruin the integrity of the planking walls that are there.
Yeah, this may not be a discussion to do this evening. I'm not sure. There are some ways to work with it, and there are people who know a lot about this. I know sort of the tip of the iceberg, but we can find some people to talk with you about it. But it may be that it's not spray foam. It may be that you're looking at blown in instead.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
A blown in cellulose.
Yeah.
And some rock wool in crucial places, especially between the where the floors meet and meet the ceiling. You can put rock wool on the walls, but there are ways to insulate an old building that aren't a big problem, that will give you quite a bit of help. So, but don't plan on using the attic is a big one. You want to get that really highly insulated.
Yeah, because there's no insulation up there that I can tell of right now.
I'm not surprised.
Mm-hmm.
And the question about a heating system or an HVAC system, there are some people locally who can do very helpful work with you on that. And since you're going to be clearing the site, you might, and you do have the space, you might consider doing geothermal on the site. Couple of vertical wells rather than horizontal wells. You probably could do very, very well with a geothermal system.
And there are a couple of people in town who have done geothermal recently. If you need people to talk to about their experiences and with the process of installation, as well as how it's been working for them. But if your customers, the owners, choose to go a more traditional route, yes, clearly a condenser, an HVAC unit placed to the side or the back of the building, not visible from the street, is ideal. Everybody has to have their systems in place somewhere, but I'm encouraged that you're really trying to think of energy efficiency and potentially newer technologies to work with. So that discussion about where to apply for a permit to, you have a little feedback here with the understanding that the roof structure is going to be demolished and replaced, but working in the newest section of the L in terms of demolition. And then if the permit needs a field change, if you have to go further into that middle section of the L, is that a permit for an application for a public hearing for a demolition that Pat and Jesse would be comfortable voting on tonight to set a demolition for a public hearing for the next meeting?
Yeah, I would. I'm smiling at Pat's cat.
I know, me too. I'm smiling at you, smiling at Pat's cat. Sorry. This doesn't have to go in the notes, Marcia. But
if we don't have to remove any more of the exterior structure, is the demo permit still necessary?
We
Yes.
do look at demo permits in terms of partial demolitions of structures. Yes,
I mean, any more than has already been.
But that's expired though.
Yeah.
No. I mean, in other words,
Anymore that's already been removed. If nothing else but the roof trusses, you're saying nothing else is going to be removed?
yeah, if that is the case, if we find that we don't need if we don't need to disturb any more of the exterior building than has already been disturbed, it's just rebuilding from here, is a demo permit still necessary?
No. However, because it's a process of requesting a public hearing at one meeting, holding public hearing at the next, if you are thinking you want to move forward sometime before mid-March with any additional demolition, we should at least set the public hearing for the February meeting. If you're
Okay.
not ready for a public hearing, it could get bumped to the March meeting. So
Yeah,
that we're trying to be strategic for you. That it's up to you. But I think we're all glad that work is happening and now do not want to hold it up based on the requirements of the law in terms of setting a public hearing, giving notice, and then holding it at the next meeting.
And I appreciate that.
So that's up to you. We could either do it at the meeting on the second Tuesday in February, or we meet on the second Tuesday of each month. So it could be March or later as well.
No, first available date is better.
Okay. So would anybody like to vote to hold a public hearing regarding the partial demolition of the rear section of the 14 Elm Street property?
I would do that without all the fancy words.
We don't need the fancy words to hold the public hearing.
Consider it
Thanks,
done.
Pat. Okay, Jesse, would you like to second?
I'll second.
Okay. Liz votes yay.
Pat, yeah,
Okay. All right. It's like dueling cats here tonight. All right. Let's see what else was on some of the things you mentioned. We will hold a public hearing at the next meeting. And Jackson will talk to you about when he needs the information for consideration at the public hearing, and when our committee needs information, but that's roughly a week or a little more before the meeting itself. Dan, with respect, did we answer enough of your questions regarding the condenser HVAC question?
Yes, it's I got the general idea. We'll come up with a plan of what we think will work for the house. Obviously, before we can do any sort of installation or plan, I back before you.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I say, this is what we're thinking, and you tell me whether or not that can work.
Exactly. And you give us as much detail as you have at the time. And if there are questions or open items, we agree what's conditional upon, more information or a field change. But we do work incrementally with a lot of folks. Regarding the brush removal, Jackson, I do not know of any rules prohibiting the removal of brush around structures. And you've explained the tree removal process to Dan, correct?
Yes, we
Okay.
talked it through on site. I recommended that if he's going to do any major brush removal that provides privacy between he and his neighbors, this building and whatever adjacent buildings there are, he discussed that with them. One side of the east side of the property does have a fence that's almost 6 feet high on it. I do believe it's in some disrepair. And so there's just things to discuss with neighbors and to let us know what's going on. The backyard has 2 very large black locust in it. And I think those are the kind of the only really contributing trees on the property. They're not our favorite trees around here, but they still are part of the backdrop to Doubleday. So whether or not they can be trimmed, or if arguments can be made for major trimming of those, you can just bring them to us, Dan.
And that would be bring them to Jackson for review by the tree committee, not HPARB, correct?
Correct. Yep. I think most of the other elements of this project will be handled through HPARB if he's not talking about changing the footprint or the volume, the use of the structure. Then Dan, I don't know if for your builder, if there's going to be some elevations and a little bit of a site plan put together, but that would help you condense your project into fewer meetings if you're able to put together a kind of a total plan to present to us. If you do have window changes you'd like, or door changes, as you saw from that George's presentation, he just puts together a little tear sheet saying, this is the door, this is the material, this is the color, and letting us know.
We don't even need to know the color, actually.
You don't need the color. No.
We do not. We are not the taste police. We do not dictate color. No. And I assume that Dan has been given, for example, or made privy of the window guidelines And Dan, I don't know if you've worked on either in historic districts before or on properties that are on the state or and national register, but the ideal is replacement of materials in kind when it comes to these properties if the original materials cannot be saved. And Jesse, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all in terms of the ideal.
Well, the ideal is to rehab existing window sash if they can be. I haven't looked too closely at what you have. I know a lot of them have been removed, and it's just the storm sash that are there now. I don't know where they went. Some of them were pretty early, probably, given the size of the lights and the number of lights. So that's something to look into. I would say the one you have the little attic sash still, the little 6 lights that flank the chimneys on both sides. They're high enough up that they should be able to be kept. There are people around who can rehab those for you. They're actually not that hard to do. I've done all of mine. And in terms of new windows, yeah, you're going to be you are looking at in-kind replacements, so wood, possibly clad, because as Jackson noted, new lumber doesn't hold up very well. And there are people who can talk with you about that too, what your best, what your strongest choices are. One thing that comes to mind on this one is, are you thinking of trying to use historic tax rehabilitation credits, HTCs? It sounds like it would be a commercial property because it's not going to be the actual homeowner who's doing this work, but it's worth quite a lot of money in our distressed census tract to try and work with the state if you can, which is a conduit to the federal. It's actually a 2-tiered system. I am not experienced with doing commercial, but there are people out there who can help you with commercial, and it could be well worth your while. It can be used, it can be put towards things like your heating system, your HVAC system, whatever you choose, remodeling kitchens, and basically, but it does involve giving plans to people at the state for them to go over. So they won't approve anything. They approve in advance of work. They don't approve after you've done work. So, but as I say, it can be worth a lot of money. If you're planning to flip the property, there's a descending credit that comes to you the longer that you hold the property, up to 7 years, I think it is. You would get all of the credit, but as you start decreasing the number of years you hold the property, then that changes. But if it were being held on to as a baseball rental property.
Right, and the owner has been made aware of the grant system.
Good.
I think he's looking into it, but I don't know,
Okay.
he handles the finances.
The reason that I'm saying this is because if you do, there will be a discussion about window configuration, window placement, window material, and they would ask you to find someone who can repair that front door. The front door is pretty early. It's been allowed to rot at the bottom end, but the rest of the door I think is probably sound and can be repaired. And there are people out there who have collections of old lumber that will make that repair last a lot longer than putting in plantation lumber wood to replace, because the lower rail needs to be completely replaced, and probably much of the lower portions of the stiles. But those, but there are people locally who can do that kind of work and do it well. But definitely, keep the door if you can. The door's so wide, it's going to be a pain to try and replace it with something else anyway.
It has side lights as well, and we wouldn't be changing any of the. We would not be changing any of the. It would look identical. Let's put it that way. We wouldn't be changing any of the sizes or anything else of the sort.
Okay.
But that obviously has to come later on when we have a little bit more of a plan, and something that has to be brought before you. As far as the windows go, the windows I think most of the windows that are missing or were either destroyed during the fire or destroyed thereafter, I don't have any way of knowing, are in the back portion. So I understand that where is the line between, like, say, the back wall? Part of the beauty of that property is the fact that it does overlook Doubleday Field. If we put in the same size windows as the front, you lose some of that ability to look out both on the back covered porch in the backyard, as well as from the second floor, being able to look over the field. And we have to balance this line between privacy and between privacy as well as the view from there. But would love to go with a larger window. Haven't done enough homework on that one yet, but does it need to be some sort of like a larger picture window is like something that we would like upstairs, maybe some patio style doors downstairs of some sort, on the very rear wall, which has been, which is gone. There's nothing there. What kind, does that need to fit into the same period look of the front?
I don't
Or
think
any of the
so. I
rest
mean,
of it?
there would never have been a picture window in that period.
I know that.
It seems to me that for things that are building new that are facing to the rear, the quality, you're looking for high quality, you're looking for quality construction, but you're not necessarily looking to mimic historic design.
And the ideal is to somewhat differentiate,
Yeah.
so it doesn't suggest a historicism.
Yeah.
So keeping it clean and simple is probably a good way to go. But you do not have to replicate what's happening on the front.
Even though it's in the back, though, we still need to come before you with our plans, right?
Yes, the HPAR's goal is to maintain the historic character, especially the street facing views of a building. However, the way the law is written and the way the village's zoning laws work, all exterior changes on a property are reviewed by HPAR.
Okay.
Part of that, Dan, is after 100 years, after all of your very fine carpentry has survived, what you do now will then be part of the historic fabric of the village in that building, and we'll have it well documented.
Yep.
Say circa 2022. Circa 2022, these beautiful windows were put in the back, and now you have to maintain them because.
That's right. Ye oldie timey windows. No, I hope that makes sense, but it is so we can carefully maintain the character throughout while maintaining historic fabric in the community.
Excuse me, Dan.
Yeah.
Do you, for the back section, which is essentially going to be built from new, do you have design help in that area?
We're going to have to get some, but we don't at this time.
Okay, I mean, I would really recommend it because the quality of the design will very often determine what the decision of a board will be. Because even if it's not historic, if it looks great to them, they sort of roll over. Now, I'm not suggesting we would ever roll over, but
Of course.
Having some design help on that will A, help you as far as your client is concerned, and B, work well with the village.
And to that point, Dan, what we would say is for areas that are completely new, not on the front, and especially on the sides to the rear of the building, false historicism doesn't make our hearts go pitter pat. We'd rather see something that's honestly new construction, but well executed and well designed construction. So we're not looking for it to have these, something that's mimicking, whatever was done in the federal period when that house was built. We're looking for something that combines with it, doesn't clash with it too much, ideally not at all, but so carries some aspects of it, you know, but is not going to, it's not trying to pretend that it's old. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. I'm trying to type all this stuff down at the same time that you're speaking.
Yeah, we're not looking for it to mimic something that it isn't. But we'd like it to complement and to work with what is already there. And we have examples of things that do that well in the village, and we have a lot of examples of things that don't do that well in the village. And if you want, some of us will walk around with you and show you the difference, at least from our standpoint.
That would actually be a fun and informational tour.
Yes, and it's the kind of tour I love to do. So
Just let us know when you're gonna be around and we'll try to take a
set
stroll.
up some time.
Maybe on a day that's not
I'd
0
make myself
degrees.
I'd make myself available, but my toes are gonna be numb if I went out right now.
Yeah, well, it's chilly. You got to dress for it.
So I hope our feedback has given you enough direction to move forward with the owners, Dan. And we look forward to working with you and the owners. And I'll speak for myself. I'm delighted that somebody has taken on this building and is interested in maintaining it.
Okay, great. If I could bother you for just one more moment, windows. If I'm going to replace multiple windows on the back section of the building, I'd probably want to replace them all on the back section of the building so that they all look alike. Obviously to bring the design before you first, with those the wooden clad windows and such that you'd find appropriate. And Jackson has helped me out with that in understanding what you're pretty much looking for. So I'm steered in the right direction there. If we do that with all new windows in the back, is it frowned upon? Like, let's just say the windows are workable or repairable in the front portion of the house, but that's the oldest portion of the house. Would it be looked upon not so kindly if I also wanted to go through and replace the front ones as well, just so they were so that the windows were all congruent with one another through the entire house? Or would you as HPARB rather see a differentiation between the back portion, which is older, which is newer, and has the missing windows currently, and the front portion, which I may have all their windows, I'm not 100%, but I think it may have all the windows right now, but just not necessarily working order?
I can only speak for myself, but quite frankly, the fact that they are distinct sections would lead me to suggest that you do everything that you possibly can to keep the fenestration in the front the way it is.
Okay.
And what you do with the back is more open to negotiation and suggestion and that sort of thing. I've seen buildings where an end burned off and it was replaced completely with glass. The whole end of the building was glass. And it worked very well in that particular case. But the thing is, what we would need to see is actually graphic evidence, design elevations, perspectives, whatever you can come up with that actually would show us what it is that you would like to do. But I would shy away from trying to think of those front windows as replaceable.
And is attempting to match the front and the back. We were talking about that differentiation. I realize some people, potentially the owners, may say, well, it makes more sense to us to have all the windows matched. But our goal as the Historic Preservation Board is to ideally save the windows that are there through measures to maintain them, and not to see historic windows replaced to match new windows in a newer section.
Okay.
we're being a little cagey. It is a gray area, but our ultimate ideal would be to save and preserve, maintain those original windows. And really the quality of those windows is going to far exceed the quality of virtually any windows that could be purchased today. That would be our ideal. People have come to us with evidence of irreparable windows. And we have considered replacement, but if your owners are really trying to celebrate the history of this particular structure and do what they can to return it to the gem that it was, as one of the proudest houses in this village at one point, maintaining the original fenestration would be the ideal.
And then that brings me to the last thing I mentioned was about the building permit. When I called them, they needed some sort of a documentation from, I think they said zoning. But what is that and how do I accomplish that?
Jackson.
So that is going to be a document set, or a document set that illustrates all the details of what we've just been discussing. Basically, when you go to county codes and say, this is what we would like to construct, they say, is that okay with the village? And so if you're sticking to the same footprint and envelope, things like that are relatively easy, but it would be great for us if that document set included details such as window and door replacements and locations, and just what the volume and the roof line of the back end that's most heavily damaged will look like, details such as that. And then that will cross over with your building plan that code enforcement will look at to make sure that you've got the headers that you need and things like that in there. Anybody else weigh in on that? Did I get it?
I think you got it. And
Yeah,
I think that, Pat, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No. I just said I thought Jackson had it.
Yeah. And one of the reasons they pointed you back toward the village and specifically HPARB is so people don't move forward with exterior changes without coming to HPARB. That's kind of, we've developed this system where they know that we have reviewed and approve of plans before they issue a permit. And so, because not everybody who does work in the village or is aware that HPARB is part of a layer of the permitting process. So I hope that makes more sense to you. But so as you have plans taking shape and are getting ready to apply to a building permit, make sure Jackson has you on the agenda for the first Tuesday of the month previous to that. So you can bring to us your plans, materials, replacement materials, and or plans to, if it's replacement in kind or a restoration, that's great. If we do issue field changes, if things change along the way, but at least we have reviewed your plans and you can then go with an HPARB permit to county code for your building permit.
Okay, and so that would be before our next, was it this public hearing that was set for the second Tuesday of February?
You can bring it to us then also if you're ready. If not, your application you can let Jackson know you're ready for the March meeting or whatever
Okay.
meeting, and we just again need those materials about a week before the meeting.
Understood. Okay, well, thank you for all of your help and the information that you gave me. That was actually very helpful. And so I guess Jackson continues to be my friend, and we keep on communicating about.
Point of contact. We are not friends.
Ouch.
No, no. I think we
I
have,
know we got
I think
along
we have
so
a
well.
decent rapport, Dan, and I look forward to working with you on this.
That's zoning friend forever. We all look forward to seeing this progress, and we thank you for your patience with us, and we'll all work together, and it will be fabulous, I'm sure. Thank you.
Forward to it. Thanks for coming, Dan.
Thank you. Okay, now we're gonna talk about 34 Maple Street. Pat and Jesse, did either of you get over to look at the little green flags posted?
Yep.
Okay. Pat, I know you may not have been at the meeting where we discussed the proposed lap pool at 34 Maple Street and the hardscaping around it, and then the fence that will go around the hardscaping. Because it's a relatively small lot and it's on the side of the house where the pool is proposed and relatively close to the sidewalk and the street. We did ask the owner to go beyond doing a drawing and plant some stakes or flags, so we would understand where the hardscaping and the fence kind of were going to be in terms of the footprint. So we would understand how that sits in perspective to the street, since it's visible from the street. And that's why we're really trying to be very thoughtful about this particular decision. Were you able to get over and take a look at it, Pat?
No, unfortunately, I was not, and
Okay.
I apologize for that.
Okay.
And it certainly puts me at a disadvantage in terms of casting a vote
Mhm.
on it.
I understand. Jesse, in terms of looking at it, how are you feeling about it?
Well, I have a few questions. It is it's close enough to everything that I think the fence that, I think they're going to have deer swimming in the place, but if they don't mind the deer or the bears, because bears might go swimming there too. You do have bears up that back hill, pretty sure.
We do. I can guarantee that.
Yes. I am barring the question of whether there's a drainage problem, because I also suspect that it's going to pick up a lot of water off that slope, because the slope comes right down almost to the edge that's proposed of the hardscaping. I think it's just going to sluice off the hardscaping and into the pool. If they're not worried about those things, I'm worried about the aesthetics of what it looks like. And one of the things I don't know is how high is the fence required to be around a pool by the it's probably state code. It's state codes, I
I
think.
assume, yeah. Jackson, do you know the height?
I believe it's 48 inches, and there's some real specifics about how it needs to be constructed so that it's not climbable, and I think they have to have
Right.
arms on them and things like that. Just so to get everybody caught up here, the only point of contact I have for this is Bill, the pool guy, and he's got a flip phone. I can call him right now to answer any questions. He did give us the write-up regarding the drainage coming off the hill. And in his application, the ground, there is going to be a change in elevation there. But I think it's a matter of, inches, a foot max. The area next to the hill is going to be tiled to redirect water around and away from the pool. Should I pull up the past application? I think this is the third time maybe.
It's
I think
the
it's
third
third.
time,
Third.
yeah.
I really want to know because there were several different fences these two fences that are provided in the application. One of them is a stockade style, and that's, as far as I'm concerned, a no-go.
Yep.
The iron one sure looks to me like I could climb that. Because there's all those places for footholds.
Code requirements. And so aesthetically, if we have opinions about it, then we should certainly weigh in on that. Whether or not it meets the code or not is going to be,
Right.
Tony.
Right. For climbability, you're looking at something that's pretty solid, and that's just I'd be inclined to say I would feel pretty opposed to that. It's gonna look funny.
The stockade fence or the pool, Jesse? I'm just trying to clarify when you say opposed to that.
The big problem is the fence. I
So
mean,
can we
if
separate?
they want to put a pool there, I don't think it's a terrible problem, but the fencing that's required to go around it is going to be a problem just from an aesthetic visual sense. I mean, the
Gonna
pool,
have to be close enough that a 4-inch ball can't pass through it. It's going to not be able to be allowed to have horizontal members, etc. Is there any way that we can separate the fence and the pool? Can we approve
And ask for some other examples of fences.
and just ask for a separate application entirely?
Mhm.
I think that would be okay with all parties here, the pool guy in particular.
With the condition that the pool construction not begin until the fence is approved, since
correct,
they're gonna need a fence around the pool.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, to me,
We
that
can-
makes sense.
I am very concerned about the idea, if Jesse feels that water is going to sluice down a hill, and to have the pool guy decide how to divert that water effectively.
Yeah.
I don't consider that adequate.
Yeah. That occurs to me too, as Jackson was describing it, because it's going to go coursing down Maple Street.
Right. In other words, I think this needs more planning than just slapping tile up against the slope.
And I think there have been, as a homeowner on Maple Street with a
Yeah.
lot of drainage issues, I can speak to that directly. Not every house has the same drainage issues, but because of the hill, we all have drainage issues. And I have always been concerned that there will be drainage issues. I wonder, and this, pros and cons, but is it more organic? I understand they're maybe putting the pool as far back as they are because they think of the streetscape, and maybe it's the the setbacks, excuse me, Jackson, that are the issue in terms of the sidewalk and stuff. But is it more organic to think about a fence line that doesn't surround the pool at a weird angle in the yard, but a fence, and I know the fence has to be within a certain proximity of the pool within state law too, but encouraging the pool actually come more toward the street, so the fence line is not as wonky, and then the fence and everything is away from the hill, and the fence is more along the street as opposed to halfway through the yard. I struggle with the aesthetic of the fence surrounding the hardscaping when it's all coming out at an angle in the yard. And as somebody who knows drainage issues on Maple Street, I struggle with the proximity to the hill.
I would just like to add the town that I came from, some people near where I live put in a pool and were almost immediately stricken by drainage issues where actual mud went into the pool. They never used it again.
Yeah, I find myself wondering if that's where this pool would be headed. Go ahead, Jackson.
I'm curious and concerned just about what exact elements of this are within the HPAR purview. I think I tried to take this to the planning board, and they there's nothing in the village law that says that anybody really has any say over drainage, which there should be concerns.
In which case, I would have to back away, but I mean, just as advice to the homeowner.
Right. So
don't fill your pool full of mud.
Right. Solid. Can I, and I think that I can get the pool guy on the phone right now. It's not going to necessarily clarify things immediately. I can also share his commentary, but I mean, it's going to be a professional excavator that he's worked with. And I know we can't approve something just based on somebody's, personal history with pool construction. But just what are the elements of this that we are deciding are okay and not okay? And I think we're comfortable with there being a pool in the front yard, right?
Oh, in the side yard, yeah.
Yeah,
Side yard.
I think it's placement and fencing, isn't it, Liz?
Yeah, because the fencing will come out at an angle surrounding the pool, correct?
which I think is meant to
And-
follow, to be
Hillside.
parallel to the hillside.
Yes,
rather than
yes.
the road. Yep.
And that to me is aesthetically more disruptive than fencing that goes parallel to the sidewalk. That's just a personal thing. But I think if we're talking about the street view in a historic district, the kind of historic nature of how fencing would be laid out is part of that. And maybe I'm getting too picky, but that's the thing that I'm really struggling with is you're going to have some yard and then you're going to have a fence. I get why the fence is there. We all know that there's a pool behind it, but am I sticking on that too much? And then yes, drainage might not be in our purview, but I think for very practical reasons, we're concerned for the homeowner's choice to put the pool that close to the hillside. And experience and, having repaired basement walls and replaced French drains and everything else and spent thousands and thousands of dollars on drainage that you never see and sometimes work and sometimes doesn't,
Of course. I'm
So,
asking as much as anything because it's new to
yeah.
me. I just feel like kind of,
I think nobody's trying to stand in the way of their pool or their goals as much as it is visible from the street. So how do we aesthetically mitigate the impact with the fencing, which is going to be necessary? That's not even in a sense reversible because as long as there's that hole in the ground, there's going to be a fence there. And then just for the homeowner's sake, the reality of maybe they don't have drainage issues in their home, but there may be drainage issues created with this particular construction.
Yep.
Those are my concerns. I have to step away from the computer for back.
One of the things I would say about a 4-foot fence right along the sidewalk in that part of the village, which was all built between 1915 and maybe 1910, 1925. By that time, people didn't build fences like that around their properties anymore. I mean, the 4-foot fence when my house was built in 1886 wasn't as uncommon because there were still people who kept pigs in the village and things, things that they wanted to keep out of their gardens. But that height of a fence by the period when that whole neighborhood is laid out would be unusual, just because people weren't building fences like that anymore, and the few that were built were taken during World War II because for scrap. I think a metal fence makes more sense. You could look through it, but then of course you're in your bathing suit practically on the sidewalk on Maple Street. I mean, I don't know if any, I don't think I'd be real comfortable with that, and I'm not known for being very prudish, but.
But the metal fence pictured is also very contemporary.
Yeah.
So that metal fence, I don't think is right. I get what you're saying, Jesse. It's tricky because if somebody were trying to put a pool in their backyard, nobody would have to look at it. But this is a big strip of street that is going to draw attention.
Yeah.
And
and I suspect in the end, self-consciousness might take over, and there won't, either that or, people on Maple Street will be like, as they walk past, or possibly staring, depending on the circumstances.
Depends on who the owners are.
Yeah.
the owners have expressed that this is for a medical therapeutic purpose. And I don't know if anybody was able to take another look at the application, but there is a letter in there from the pool builder basically saying how he intends, what the intent is to deal with water runoff to keep the pool from filling with mud. It doesn't necessarily say where the water would be drained to. I don't know if we can require that. I'm just trying to not have, I'm hoping we don't go over this.
yeah, and I know the Rattons, I don't know them well, but I know they go away for the winter.
They're in Arizona.
And this is one of the tricky situations where, yes, Bill, the pool guy, knows how to install pools, But where we have often in the past said, we would really like the homeowners in on this conversation because we want to make sure they're hearing our concerns
Right.
and
They sh-
not just the pool guy's interpretation of our concerns. And so, I think ultimately we may be in a big gray area in terms of our purview, but our hesitations are grounded in practicality.
I mean, if they're someplace else and we're meeting on Zoom next month, do they have a good excuse for not being here?
No, the last meeting was a doctor's, last meeting, they weren't able to be here because of a previously scheduled doctor's meeting.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what's up with this one.
Now, I know they want to plan, they want to get on the pool guy's schedule. The original drawing we got was too,
It wasn't to scale.
yeah, not to scale and a little too informal to really have a sense of what was going on. Are we, if they're trying to get on this gentleman's schedule, are we able to approve the installation of the size pool and size hardscaping they are proposing so they can commit to working with this gentleman with the understanding that we would like to ask them to participate in ideally the next HPARB meeting to have a broader conversation about the aesthetic of the fence from the street and therefore potentially the angle or layout and the concerns about drainage in general, even though it may not be in our purview, that this board is sincerely concerned that they understand that we have concerns about drainage as residents of the village who know how this hill drains, as opposed to a contractor who may not have that same understanding.
Totally, yeah. As far as the concerns regarding drainage and just letting the homeowners directly know that matters in their relationship with their neighbors and the maintenance of the road and things like that, it needs to be.
And ultimately their investment, it may have a downstream impact in terms of the road, their neighbors, but I think
Possibly selling the property as well.
right.
Yep.
I think the practical experience of people, if that's not getting communicated through their contractor to them, and just to have a conversation with them so they know our interests are their best interests.
Yeah.
And our concerns about fence style is aesthetic in the neighborhood and also fence positioning in terms of we are not here to design for them or to tell them where to put the pool, but my concern would be that the fence be positioned more parallel to the sidewalk, so aesthetically it doesn't look even more inappropriate than it has to, if that makes sense.
That could potentially be done without even changing the orientation or layout of the pool. Just
Okay.
make
Yeah,
it.
and I wasn't sure. I thought we had talked about it at the last meeting that it had to surround the hardscaping.
No, it was just versus surrounding the whole property.
Okay.
Last
So thus, if the kind of conversation starts that the pool doesn't have to be set back per se as much, maybe, if we're asking them to have the fencing parallel to the sidewalk as opposed to angled around the hardscaping, maybe that gives them, depending on the setbacks, Jackson, which is your conversation to have with them,
Right.
more flexibility in terms of deciding whether it has to be so close to the hill and dealing with drainage. And, maybe they're pushing it back toward the hill because they think that would be what we would want. So those are questions that I think might go beyond the pool guy.
Right.
Does that make sense, Jesse and Pat?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that, Jackson, if you're the person who's primarily in touch with the pool guy, maybe you can get through to the owners and say, it would be very beneficial to getting your application sorted out to be at the meeting in February. Can you please put it on your calendar and make sure that you're in the Zoom for that? I think a lot of this, we're speculating and we're just sort of, we're beating around a bush that would maybe we just need to talk directly with
Yeah.
the owners.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Jackson, if you don't have their contact information, I don't have it, but I know somebody who does. So, okay.
And they were
So,
CC emailed to
okay,
an invitation to this meeting, but if it's not on their radar and you're in Arizona, then
yeah.
that's it. So
and ultimately it is really, I think our questions are fair in terms of, have they considered this or have they only been given one perspective? And so, I do not want them to feel like we are anti their pool.
Right.
I would like them to know that, this is just a bigger concern about execution and making it
We've got
happen fast.
questions.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I will respond to them via email.
I'm sorry to put you through this.
Nope. It's the nature of the thing.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions regarding this application? Okay. All right. We can move on to the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Jesse and I were both there. Roger is no longer on this committee, so he would not be able to vote to approve. And Dave was at the meeting. So 2 out of 3 of us were there. Does that sound like we can approve the minutes, Jackson, legally, or Marcia, legally?
I don't know.
Okay.
I do not know.
Why don't we try? And
Okay,
if not, we can reapprove them when Dave is with us again.
that sounds great. That's-
Okay.
We'll find it here and there.
Jesse, were you able to review the minutes?
I skimmed them. I haven't read them in great detail.
Okay. I did. I am confident with Michael's representation of the meeting. I know Jackson and I asked Michael some specific questions and got some clarifications and revisions in the minutes. I will motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, and if we determine that Dave really needs to weigh in on this also, we can do another motion at another meeting to formally accept them.
Sounds good. I'll dig
Okay.
into that, figure it out in between.
Thank
here.
you. Sorry. Just want to
Nope.
make sure all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed. But if we didn't do it without Dave, then we'd all forget for months and months and we'd be in a pickle too. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate everybody's time tonight. I'm sorry we were at the 1.5 hour mark. I know we tried to keep a short agenda short, but it never quite works that way.
Feel like we covered some good ground with 14.
Yeah. I would like to really try to work with them, but I think it would be helpful to talk to them. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thanks,
Anybody
Pat.
else?
Jesse, Liz.
Thank
Mark.
you.
Yep.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
everybody.
Thank
Happy
you,
New
Jackie.
Year.
Happy New
Marcia,
Year.
if we've
them
driven you
both.
crazy, please tell me if we need to do anything differently, but thank you for hanging in there with us.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay
night.
well and warm.
Yeah, both. Bye.
Bye-bye.